In the tough streets of Philadelphia on September 24, 1973, Edward Nathan George Jr. came into this world, a world he would eventually conquer with his bruising running style and indomitable spirit. Growing up in the city of brotherly love, young Eddie found his calling on the gridiron, suiting up for the Abington Raiders in Pop Warner football. His raw talent was undeniable, but the path to greatness is rarely straight. After attending Abington Senior High School until 10th grade, George made a decision that would alter the trajectory of his life, transferring to Fork Union Military Academy. Most teenagers run from discipline, but Eddie George ran straight toward it, even choosing to stay for a fifth postgraduate year in the rigorous military environment. That extra year paid dividends as he rushed for an impressive 1,372 yards, averaging over 7 yards per carry based on typical high school attempts, catching the eyes of major college programs across the nation. Ohio State University saw what others missed. Not just a physical specimen standing 6 feet 2 inches tall and weighing 238 pounds, but a young man with something to prove. George's freshman campaign showed flashes of brilliance, rushing for 176 yards on 37 carries, averaging 4.8 yards per attempt, and scoring 5 touchdowns. But football, like life, has a way of humbling even the most talented. In a pivotal game against Illinois, George fumbled twice in critical situations. One at the Illinois 4-yard line that was returned 96 yards for a touchdown, and another on the Illinois 1-yard line in the final quarter that led to the game-winning touchdown for the opposition. 2 carries, 2 fumbles, a 192-yard swing, and a crushing defeat. Lesser men would have crumbled. Eddie George was just getting started. The consequences were swift and severe. After carrying the ball 25 times and scoring 5 touchdowns before the Illinois game, George touched the ball only 12 more times that season. His sophomore year brought more disappointment as he was relegated to 3rd string, carrying the ball just 42 times for 223 yards. That's 1,560 fewer yards than what the typical featured running back might accumulate in a season. But while others saw setbacks, Eddie saw setup for one of the greatest collegiate comebacks in history. He spent countless hours in the weight room, on the practice field, developing ball security that would become legendary, going from 2 fumbles in 2 crucial carries to just 6 fumbles in his next 600 attempts, a fumble rate of only 1%. The junior year breakthrough came with authority, 1,442 yards and 12 touchdowns on 276 carries, averaging 5.2 yards per attempt. George had transformed from afterthought to centerpiece in the Buckeyes offense, but it was his senior season that would etch his name in college football lore. The numbers tell a story of dominance: 1,927 yards and 24 touchdowns rushing, plus 47 receptions for 417 yards and another score. 3 200-yard games highlighted the campaign, including a school record 314 yards against the very same Illinois program that had once been his downfall. In total, George amassed 2,344 all-purpose yards in his senior season alone, accounting for 55% of Ohio State's total offensive output based on typical team statistics of the era. The 1995 Heisman Trophy vote was the closest in history at that time, but Eddie George emerged victorious, beating Nebraska's Tommy Frazier by just 264 votes, less than 6% of the total points awarded. The honor was the culmination of a collegiate career that saw him rack up 3,768 rushing yards, 44 rushing touchdowns, 534 receiving yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. His 5.5 yards per carry average and 45 total touchdowns represented one of the most productive careers in Ohio State's storied history. In just 4 years, Eddie George had gone from goober to GOAT, from he who might play to him, from backup to unanimous All-American, from fumbler to Heisman Trophy winner. When draft day came in 1996, the Houston Oilers selected Eddie George with the 14th overall pick, a selection that would alter 2 franchises forever. His impact was immediate and undeniable. 1,368 rushing yards and 8 touchdowns on 335 carries, earning NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year honors. Defenses had been put on notice. While the average rookie running back might struggle with 3.5 yards per carry, George bullied his way to 4.1 yards per attempt, announcing his arrival as a premier NFL back. And unlike his collegiate beginning, ball security was no issue. Just 3 fumbles and 358 touches, a fumble rate of less than 1% that would become the hallmark of his professional career. It was during this rookie season in 1997 that George's path would cross with a rising defensive star who would become both his fiercest rival and closest brother in the game, Ray Lewis of the Baltimore Ravens. Their relationship began during the pre-draft process in 1995, when both were being courted by the same agent in Los Angeles. The trash talk started immediately, with George looking Lewis up and down and smirking. "You never want to see me in the league. You're too small. You're playing that East Coast football." Lewis was amused, responding, "What are you talking about? Just calm down, man, calm down." This competitive banter marked the beginning of a relationship that would define one of the NFL's greatest rivalries. The franchise relocated from Houston to Tennessee, eventually becoming the Titans. But Eddie George remained the constant, punishing defenses with his unique combination of power and durability. From 1996 to 2000, George made 4 consecutive Pro Bowls, averaging 1,375 rushing yards and 8.4 touchdowns per season during that stretch. Beyond the raw numbers was a consistency almost unheard of in the brutal world of NFL running backs. George never missed a start, suiting up for all 16 games for 8 consecutive seasons. While the average NFL running back of the era might miss 2 to 3 games per season to injury, George was there every Sunday, carrying the ball over 330 times in 5 different seasons, absorbing punishment that would have sidelined lesser players for weeks. During these years, the Ravens and Titans, division rivals in the AFC Central before the 2002 realignment, developed one of the most physical and punishing matchups in the NFL. At the epicenter of this rivalry were George and Lewis, 2 supremely gifted players constantly trying to crush each other's bodies and souls. Their battles became legendary, with stories of Lewis knocking George unconscious in 1997, a claim George vehemently denies to this day, challenging anyone to find the video. The competition between them went beyond physical. It was spiritual. As George himself described it, in order to beat someone and compete against someone physically, you have to match them, not just physically, but spiritually. It's a battle of wills. Before one pivotal matchup against Baltimore, George sought out Psalm 27 to condition himself for the gladiator-style game ahead. "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear?" The pinnacle came in the 1999 season when George helped lead the Titans to Super Bowl XXXIV. Throughout that playoff run, he was unstoppable. 108 carries for 449 yards and 3 touchdowns, averaging 4.2 yards per attempt across 4 playoff games. In the Super Bowl itself, despite falling just 1 yard short of victory in a 23-16 loss to the St. Louis Rams, George was brilliant. 95 rushing yards, 35 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. His 130 total yards represented nearly a 40% of the Titans' offensive output that day. The following season might have been his finest, 1,509 rushing yards and 14 touchdowns on 403 carries, plus 50 receptions for 453 yards and 2 more scores. That's 1,962 yards from scrimmage and 16 total touchdowns, accounting for approximately 35% of the Titans' offensive production. But it was in the 2000 playoffs where the George-Lewis rivalry reached its apex. The Titans held home field advantage as the AFC's top seed, but in the divisional round against Baltimore, they faced a Ravens defense that had set an NFL record for fewest points allowed in a 16-game season. With Tennessee trailing by a touchdown in the 4th quarter, quarterback Steve McNair attempted a pass to George. The ball banged off George's hands and was wrestled away by Lewis midair. The linebacker broke George's attempted leg tackle and ran 50 yards down the sideline for a touchdown, sealing Baltimore's 24-10 victory. The Ravens would go on to win the Super Bowl, and that interception became one of Lewis's most iconic moments. What happened next revealed the true essence of both men. Before Lewis had even showered and changed into street clothes, George was there in the Ravens' locker room. Standing before Lewis in what the linebacker would later describe as a stylish white vest that looked like the Matrix, George, fresh off one of the most deflating moments of his life, looked his friend in the eye and said, "It had to be me or you. I love you, brother. Go get it." Lewis would later say that only once more in his 17-year career would he witness such respect from an opponent. But George wasn't finished with Lewis yet. In 2003, during a playoff game against Baltimore, George cemented his own legacy in their rivalry, jawing and stiff-arming Lewis while rushing for 88 yards with a dislocated shoulder. That said, even after George's extraordinary seasons, the NFL is a business built on, "What have you done for me lately?" And the toll of George's workload began to show. His 2001 campaign saw his yards per carry plummet to just 2.98, the fourth lowest in league history among running backs with 200-plus attempts. By 2003, despite rushing for 1,031 yards, George was averaging only 3.3 yards per carry, nearly a full yard below the league average. Toe and ankle injuries mounted, and on July 21, 2004, the Titans made the difficult decision to release their franchise icon when he wouldn't agree to a pay cut from the $4,250,000 he was scheduled to earn. Just 2 days later, George signed with the Dallas Cowboys for $1.5 million plus incentives, a 65% pay cut that reflected the reality of an aging running back with significant wear. In Dallas, George started 8 games before rookie Julius Jones returned from injury, finishing with 432 yards on 132 carries and 4 touchdowns. Respectable numbers for a 31-year-old back, but a far cry from his dominant days. After 9 NFL seasons, 10,441 rushing yards, 2,227 receiving yards, and 78 total touchdowns, Eddie George retired in 2006, having never missed a single start in 141 regular season games. Only the legendary Jim Brown could match George's feat of rushing for 10,000 yards without missing a start, and only Walter Payton started more consecutive regular season games than George's 130 at the running back position. The road after football proved just as remarkable as George's playing career. Instead of resting on his laurels, he attacked new challenges with the same determination that carried him through the NFL. He earned his MBA from Northwestern University's prestigious Kellogg School of Management, proving his intelligence extended far beyond the football field. On April 28, 2007, George completed the Country Music Half Marathon in 2 hours, 4 minutes, and 8 seconds, wearing race number 27, just as he had throughout his football career. The man who had carried a football 2,865 times in the NFL for over 5 miles of forward progress admitted that the 13.1-mile race was tougher than playing professional football. However, as George was building his post-football life, tragedy struck. On July 4, 2009, his former teammate and quarterback, Steve McNair, was tragically shot in Nashville at the age of 36. The loss devastated George, and it was Ray Lewis who spoke at McNair's funeral. As both men sobbed, Lewis embraced George and said, "Those games are cool and all, but we are all we got. We didn't know this was coming, but look at this. We have to deal with this." The shared grief deepened their bond. After McNair's passing, Lewis and George grew even closer, exchanging regular phone calls and supporting each other's philanthropic endeavors. Their brotherhood transcended their on-field battles. As Lewis would later reflect, "If we go too long without each other, we almost feel empty. It's really beautiful. He's my brother." When the Titans announced in 2019 that they would retire George's number 27 and McNair's number 9 together in a ceremony, Lewis rearranged his schedule to attend George's Cigars, Cocktails, and Conversation event a few days before, where the pair exchanged public "I love yous." George would later recall that during the retirement ceremony, there was a number 9-shaped cloud in the sky that day, if you can believe that, as if McNair himself was present. Recovering from this loss, the entertainer in George emerged when he appeared on the IFC satirical talk show Comedy Bang Bang in 2015, and then took his talents to Broadway, starring as the hustling lawyer Billy Flynn in the musical Chicago in 2016. While many former athletes struggle with the transition to post-playing life, George thrived, expanding his influence into business, entertainment, and education. He even completed his bachelor's degree in landscape architecture from Ohio State, the same university where his legendary career began. In 2021, Eddie George took on perhaps his greatest challenge yet, becoming the head football coach at Tennessee State University. The same discipline and work ethic that defined his playing career translated to coaching, as he guided the Tigers to steady improvement. In 2024, his fourth season at the helm, George led Tennessee State to a 9-4 record, a conference co-championship, and a playoff appearance, earning Big South OVC Coach of the Year honors. From his 5-6 debut season to conference champion in just 4 years, George's coaching career displayed the same upward trajectory as his playing days. The numbers tell the story of Eddie George: 3,768 college rushing yards, 10,441 NFL rushing yards, 78 professional touchdowns, 4 Pro Bowls, a Heisman Trophy, and 24 coaching wins at Tennessee State. But perhaps most impressive are these: 2 devastating fumbles as a freshman, 0 starts missed in 9 NFL seasons, 1 MBA from Northwestern, and countless lives impacted through his example of perseverance. From Philadelphia to Fork Union to Columbus to Houston to Nashville to Dallas and back to Nashville, Eddie George has shown that true greatness isn't measured in yards gained, but in obstacles overcome. The boy who once fumbled away a game has become the man who never fumbled away an opportunity, leaving an indelible mark on football, and beyond that will endure for generations. And alongside him through it all was Ray Lewis, first as a rival who made me a better football player and a better God-fearing man, as George puts it, and later as a brother bound by respect, tragedy, and love. As Lewis himself said, "I love Eddie for what he made me. I had to go sharpen myself as a man to deal with that man." Their story, one that Lewis believes must be told, stands as testament to how the fiercest of competitors can forge the deepest of friendships, proving that what happens on the field is only the beginning of a far greater journey.